Hi, this is Algebra 1, Module 4, Lesson 3, the classwork, the notes. So we are solving equations literally. So that is really all this lesson is about, is practice solving for a certain variable. What are the steps we do to do that? So these are all numbers. There's the only variable in some of these. I guess the ones on here, the only variable is x. Over here, we do have two variables, so we won't be able to solve for one answer. So let's start with one. And you know what? I might, let's see, just a little bit more. So I've got a little more room to work with on here. All right, so let's solve this left-hand side for x. So first I'm going to, there's my x. So to undo, I want to work my way from the outside farthest from my x towards my x. So my first thing would be a times 5. What I do to one side, I've got to do to the other. So this now puts it at, you know what? Let's see how I can do this to make the best shape of my room, my space. So 3x plus 2 equals 35. And now, again, I'm working towards my x. Now 2, the plus 2 is the farthest away. So I'm going to subtract 2 from each side. Those cancel, and that gets me 3x equals 33. And now to get my x by the self, I need to undo the multiplication, which is a divide by 3. So x equals 11. 33 divided by 3 is 11. All right, next one. We will do right below it, number 3. So I'll do odds first, and then we'll go over to the evens. So now my farthest one from my x would be this minus 5. So let's add 5 to both sides. Those cancel. I like to cross out the ones that cancel just to remind myself of what needs to disappear and what needs to be solved. So I have 4/3 x equals 11 plus 5 is now 16. Now, it's I split up the 4/3 away from the x because, again, when we have a fraction like this, 4/3 times x over 1 gets me 4x over 3. So I can actually split up the 4/3. Well, to undo a times 4/3, I can multiply by the reciprocal, 3/4. Those cancel. What I do to one side, I have to do to the other side. So in this case, x equals 16 times 3. I could do that, but let's cross cancel. Let's get a different color out here. To cross cancel, 16 divided by 4 is 4. So 4 times 3 is 12. So I should have an answer of 12 for this one. And just to reiterate, if you get a number that you're like, I'm not really sure if this is right or not, double check. 12 times 4 is 48. 48 divided by 3 is 16. 16 minus 5 is 11. So you can always plug that x in to double check your work. All right, the next one, 5. Keep doing different colors here to help separate these. So my x is inside the parentheses. So let's get rid of everything outside of the parentheses. Instead of a multiply by 2/5, I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal, 5/2. Those cancel. 6 times 5/2, 6 over 1, would get me 30 over 2, which, x plus 3, 30 divided by 2 is 15. Now I can subtract my 3 from both sides. X equals 15 minus 3, which is 12. We got another 12. Again, just to double check, 12 plus 3 is 15. 15 times 2 is 30. 30 divided by 5 is 6. That works. All right. So now this one, I'm actually going to go ahead and get rid of my parentheses. Well, we could do it two ways. We could distribute and get rid of the parentheses, Or I could divide by 2 first. Well, I think I'm actually going to divide by 2 first because both 4 and 12 are even numbers. So if I divide this by 2 and divide each of these by 2, it just gives me smaller numbers to work with, and that's usually helpful. So those will cancel, leaving me 3x plus 4, and that equals 2x's. 4x's cut in half would be 2, plus 6. Now I can get all my x's on one side and all my y's on the other side. So I'm going to subtract 2x from each side. Those cancel. So that gets me 1x, x plus 4 equals 6, right? 3x's minus 2x's is 1. Now I can subtract 4 from each side. I'm running into that words down there. X equals, should be 2, right? 2 plus 4 is 6. All right, so those are the simpler ones where we have one variable we're messing with. Now let's practice with our two variables. So over here, we're still solving for x. So let's work our way towards it. So instead of dividing by 5, I want to times 5. Those cancel, times 5. I can simplify these so far, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. 3x plus 2y equals 35. Now I need to get my x by itself, which means I need to subtract 2y from both sides. Now I'm actually going to put it minus 2y over here, and I'm going to erase that one. The reason I'm doing that is so that I don't get confused and think, oh, I can subtract 2 from 35. It's not 2, it's 2 y's. I can't take y's from numbers. So those cancel, and I'm going to get 3x equals 35 minus 2y. I can't simplify that anymore. Now I need to divide by 3, and x could equal that right there. X equals 35 minus 2y divided by 3. I can't really simplify it anymore. If 3 went into each of these, then if 35 divided by 3 was a whole number, I'd probably simplify that. But since it doesn't, there's no reason. 2 divided by 3 doesn't simplify into any specific number. It's still a fraction. So I'm just going to leave it as one big fraction because I can. All right, this one. First, I need to work my way towards the x. Farthest is a minus 5y. The opposite would be plus 5y. Again, I'm not putting it under the 11 because I can't add it to the 11. So 4/3 x equals 11 plus 5y. So from here, I have the two options. So because it's a fraction, I could multiply by the reciprocal. Or I could do two separate. I like to be efficient with my time. So I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal. Those cancel, times 3/4. Now notice I have all of this over 1 because to turn it into a fraction. So when I go to simplify, 3 times all of that is actually has to stay in parentheses, or I have to distribute it. 1 times 4 is 4. So I can leave it just like that, or I could simplify it to 33 plus 15y over 4. Either one of those would be acceptable answers. Again, because neither of these are divisible by 4, there's really no reason to split them up any more than they are. Next. Scroll down a little, give me some space. Okay, so I want my x, by itself. So that means it's in the parentheses. So let's get rid of everything outside of the parentheses. Instead of a times 2/5, I'm going to multiply by 5/2. Really getting some good practice on multiplying by those reciprocals. 5/2. Okay, so that leaves me with x plus y equals 30 divided by 2. And that's 15. So I can simplify that. To get rid of a plus y, I subtract y. Oh, let's put it over here so we don't forget that that's not something we can combine. And so x equals 15 minus y. And that one's done. Last one for this page, or this section, I should say. So here we've got the similar idea, the parentheses, except we've got a y in there. So again, 2 is what I want to get rid of first because it's outside of the parentheses. Both of these two numbers are divisible by 2. So let's just go ahead and divide out 2 so that we can make smaller numbers to work with. So 3x plus 4y equals 2x plus 6y. All right, so now I've got y's and x's to each side. Let's get all the x's to one side, all the y's to the other side. So let's subtract 2x's here. And if you're really good, you can do it all in one shot. Those cancel, so that means I need to get rid of my 4y's, and I can do that in one shot. Because I'm practicing that lining them up with their right label, their right variable, you can do them at the same time. So separate, same time, either works. This leaves me with 1x over here. Those canceled, those canceled. 6 minus 4 is 2y's. But x equals 2y's. All right, and if you noticed, when we were doing these, maybe you did, maybe you didn't, notice how these 2/5 x plus 3 equals 6, 2/5 x plus y equals 6, 3x plus 4, 3x plus 4, y, 4x plus 12, 4x plus 12, y. We did essentially very similar equations. They just threw in a y, so we couldn't simplify it to the edge. All right, now let's not have any numbers and do strictly algebra. So write the verbal description for each step of the equation solving process used to solve the following equations for x. Your description should include the statements about how you know what to do when. And so, for example, first I because. So we're trying to solve for x. So this is going to be a writing one. So first, to solve for x, we need to get rid of the c. So, oh, nope. First, we got to get rid of the d, don't we? First, we need to add d to both sides. Then, once d's over, so let's go ahead and kind of write this down below. See if I can do 2 and 1 here. Ax plus b over c minus, oh, not an equals yet, minus d equals e. So first we want to add d to both sides, right? And so then I have ax plus b over c equals e plus d. Okay, so after I add d to both sides, I got to get rid of my c. So then, oh, switch back and forth here. Then, to get rid of the divide by c, we want to, then we multiply by c. Both sides, multiply both sides. by C. Okay, so switching back down here, times C times C, AX plus B equals C parentheses E plus D. All right, I can see I'm going to run out of space for my words up here. Okay, now we're at this step. Let's see if I can scoot some things over here, give myself a little more room to work with. Okay. Let's see if I can here. All right. Then we're going to multiply both sides by C. Then I need to get the plus B out of there. So I'm going to subtract B from both sides. So I'm left with AX equals C parentheses E plus D minus B. So then subtract E from both sides. And lastly, what do we have to do with that A? Well, it's a multiply, so we need to divide both sides by A. And here is our final. Let's do a different color so we can see that a little easier. There is my final answer for this one. And lastly, divide both sides by A. All right, so we kind of talked out the because part. We didn't have you write that all out, but we discussed what we're doing each time. Okay, there's 10. 9, that was 9. So let's go over here to 10. So this one, we've got to figure out what we're going to do first to solve for x. Well, let's see. The farthest thing, oh, that s is inside the root, but the r is on the outside. So first, let's get rid of this times r. So first, let's do this in green so we don't get those two confused. So first, divide both sides by r. Okay, so let's draw that down here. So we have r times the square root of mx over n plus s equals t. So if we divide both sides by r, we're left with the square root of mx over n plus s equals t over r. All right, so now we need to get rid of a square root. Well, to undo a square root, we have to square everything. Those two cancel. That gets squared. So we're going to divide both sides by r, then square. Okay, so now that we've squared both sides, we are left with mx over n plus s equals t over r squared. Okay, well, now let's again keep working our way towards the x. So instead of plus s, we need to subtract s from both sides. Notice I'm going to put it off to the side because it's not going to work quite like kind of we've got to do all these things first before we can subtract, so it's got to be separate. So now I'm left with mx over n equals t over r squared minus s. All right, so let's get up here and write what we just did. So squared both sides, then subtract s from both sides. And lastly, We are left with a fraction with the x. So I can look at this mn and think of it as a fraction. So I can times by n over m, and those will cancel, times n over m. And, right, we got both on there? Yep. All right, so how this looks, I'm going to scroll down so I can write it, draw the equation, and then we'll type in what we need. So x equals t over r squared minus s times n all over m. So this is one ugly equation when it's done, but we have put x by itself. So lastly, multiply both sides by n over m. And we made it. All right. That is it for this notes. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.